Madam President, we are live and ready to go.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to call this meeting on Thursday, May 19th at 7 p.m. to order. Can I get a pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. Is there anyone for public forum?
There is not.
Okay. Can I get an approval of the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Study items, construction change orders. Chris?
Good evening, everyone. We only have a couple of change orders for you this month. We'll have more for you next, of course. This is change order 16 for the high school, middle school project. It's related to some additional concrete, some fixtures, testing of our electrical switch gear, found some more pipes in the ground outside of our boiler room, shocking. And then overtime hours for our electricians and for our iron workers to gain time on our schedule. So all said and done, the total of this particular change order is $46,264.23. You have seen all of these things in prior construction updates. Any questions? Okay, item number two, is a proposal from Waddell Concrete. You've also read in the construction memos weekly that the ECC fence was removed from the contract, the initial contract from Wachter, due to delays in that production. We did receive the fence. The fencing contractor came out to install it, realized that there's some more flat work and demolition that's required. We did seek bids. We sent a bid request to Waddell, to Byrne & Jones, and Randy, the other one's escaping me.
Was Burkle, Jacobs Meyer, and
Jacobs
Waddell.
Meyer. Yep, thank you. The lowest came in at $22,910. The highest came in at a little north of $100,000. So it's obvious which one we went with. That was Waddell Concrete, and Randy's going to be having a coordination meeting between Empire Fence and Waddell in the coming weeks.
Okay,
Any
thank
questions?
you. Any questions? Okay, Apple Computers, Chris?
Okay, so this is the item that I asked to table at the work session earlier in the month. We had neglected to include the AppleCare, the increase in the AppleCare warranty. We used to use what was called AppleCare Parts Agreement, which allowed us as an authorized service and repair center to submit for parts and do repairs ourselves. Apple has seen fit to cancel that AppleCare product and replacing it with a much more expensive one, which still allows us to repair our own computers and order our own parts, yet it's just more expensive. So nevertheless, the change is noted here. It's a little over $110,000, and this is for our annual staff building purchase for our elementary school, along with some of our secretaries and support staff, registrars, etc. Their new refreshed desktop computers. We're in a strange, not strange, but we're in a convergence of technologies where we have computers that function very well, but they are becoming obsolete due to increases and changes in the operating system. So, planned obsolescence is a concept that is very much applicable in this situation. So, nevertheless, a little over $110,000 for this purchase, and you'll approve this later this evening. That's it.
Thank you. Any questions for Chris on that?
Chris, with the change in the price of the policy we were using, did you look at other policies we might switch to since this one went up?
There really are none. It's a good question. And you'll notice too that I didn't mention anything about seeking bids or this is one that would typically fall under a closed bid scenario because it's over 50,000. but Apple's a single source provider. They're the only ones that sell this product or that are authorized to sell it to schools. Even resellers in the area are not permitted by Apple to sell us equipment. So they do have a pretty tight grip on their product and how it's distributed. The AppleCare product we chose is the cheapest of the ones we have. I guess it's one of those, it's like insurance. You have to have insurance. You may not always use it, but when you need it, it needs to be there. So this is AppleCare is that very same thing. If we have, it covers 2 accidental breaks too. So in the past, we would have been out for replacing that computer. So let's say, heaven forbid, Stephanie Saucelle spills a glass of sweet tea on her MacBook. And I know you haven't done that, Stephanie. That's why I used you. And that was a total loss. We would be required to replace that out of district funds. This warranty would cover that replacement. And she would never, ever do that. So.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Okay, assessment plan, Rachel?
Good evening. Would you like me to share my screen, or does somebody have the presentation that they can share?
It's all you, Miss Ward.
Okay. Let me work on getting that pulled up. Is that working? Okay. All right, good evening. My name is Rachel Ward. I am the Coordinator of Assessment, Data, and Accountability for the district. And I am here to go over, review our 22-23 assessment plan for the district. So this is just a quick overview. The full assessment plan is also attached in the board docs for you to read through at your leisure here. Let me find, can you still see my screen? I'm so sorry. Other things have popped up in my way. Can everybody still see my screen? Okay. So some of the biggest changes to note here are we plan to remove the Panorama SEL survey tool. So we will continue to do social emotional learning surveys, but we do not think that we need to pay for the outside services from Panorama. So we are removing that tool. In order to have consistent, reliable benchmark data for all of our students, especially in grades 9 through 12, we need to add a benchmarking tool. This tool will ensure that we have information needed to learn about where our students are and to determine where adjustments are needed for instruction. So for all of that, there's a couple moves here, but adding that secondary tool would mean we would remove SRI, which is a reading benchmark that we currently use in grades 9 through 12. We would remove STAR 360 in 7 and 8. And we would add NWEA to grades 7 through 12 in reading, math, and science. And then as you heard previously in the gifted presentation, we're going to be adding this Naegeli general ability test as a screener. We do not currently have something like that, so we're very excited about this possibility. And then finally, due to some changes in some reporting requirements around kindergarten readiness, we are opting to participate in this kindergarten observation form through DESE, through the state of Missouri. It's an assessment that will be, or it's really more of an observation, a couple assessment questions. We will be trained for this summer, but it gives us information on the 5 reportable areas for kindergarten readiness that DESE requires, which include physical development, approaches to learning, social emotional development, cognition, and general knowledge of language and literacy. So this is the This is the assessment matrix. It's very small and hard to read here, but you should have a copy of the full report with definitions for what all of these letters stand for and how we plan to use all of these assessments. The way you read this matrix, we have the content area, or possibly the use of the assessment on the left-hand side. Across the top are the grade levels, and then within here has our different assessments that we will be administering. So this is just a pyramid that I like to show that talks about the different ways that we use assessments and the relationships among those assessments. So you can see kind of down here, this in our classroom, we use it for instruction, diagnostic. So that's where our STAR 360 and WEA would go. Unit assessments are reading levels, things like that is what our teachers use, and how we look at individual students and determine instructional levels. Then we have these little bit higher higher level of assessment for accountability purposes or for predictive, to predict how a student may perform on a certain assessment, or like the pre-ACT, for example, or even the NWEA or the STAR can predict how they may do on the MAP, or the ACT or the EOC. And then over here, we have all our assessments for accountability purposes. And then finally, at that very top are those gatekeeper assessments, those bigger AP, ACT, SAT, things like that, that we administer for our students. And then here is, oh, sorry, I didn't include this. So there's a calendar inside of the assessment plan that shows a little bit more about how we spread these out over the year. Any questions? I know that was really brief and the full plan is attached. What questions do you have for me?
Rachel, can you give us a little bit more detail about the new benchmarking, the NWEA, and why that tool was selected?
Yeah, so so STAR 360 has been our benchmarking tool in K through 8. We actually implemented it in 9th grade this year as well. It is computer adaptive. It's aligned to Missouri learning standards. But when we looked at the high school, when it's more content specific, so Algebra 1, not just potentially 9th grade math, we went with NWEA. We thought NWEA had a stronger platform and a stronger way to report that for us to be able to use that in that content specific. Also, NWEA has science and STAR 360 does not have science. So we can use that in 8th grade science and in biology. So it's just, they're very, very similar. They're both computer adaptive. They're both aligned to the Missouri learning standards. They both have a growth measurement. They had a lot of things that were similar, but we just had a few things that we thought we could gain if we used NWEA. And we didn't think that we needed to necessarily do an overhaul right away in K through 12. So that's why we have two systems right now that we're thinking for next year.
And typically, how long do we use a tool before we decide whether or not we want to stick with it? What's the evaluation period?
I would say we need at least 3 years probably to determine, get a nice, get some data that's reliable. You can get some historical data for a cohort, see how that's aligning to maybe even 3 to 5 years potentially. But I mean, if it's obviously not working for us, we can go back to that, the process. We went through TLC, we went through our CATs, we audited, we had a whole list of assessment benchmarking vendors. We had a rubric that we used with pros and cons. We got feedback from every CAT. And so that's where we landed on this one for this year. But yeah, if any issues arise, we can readdress that. But I would say at least 3 to 5 years probably.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions?
I have one. Rachel, on the Naglieri, in the additional detail for the 22-23 assessment plan, it says that this is for students in grade 1 and new to MRH.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean it's not given to anyone else?
So this will be a new assessment that we're using. The reason we said grade 1 was for the gifted benchmarking, for a universal screener for gifted. And we will then, we also thought we could use it for new students as we're starting to learn, maybe do some progress monitoring to learn some more about some students and their abilities. But we don't have national norms yet. So it's not something that we would universally administer at a larger scale yet. And as we keep using it in 1st grade, it will eventually, it'll work its way up to the upper grade levels.
So we should only expect the benefit of Naglieri in terms of equity, improved equity, to happen gradually over the years as students age into those older grades or new students coming to MRH?
I mean, I think that's something we're hoping to use it to learn more about all of our students. But if that's something we want to explore, if we use it and we learn that it is showing, like we're learning a lot out of this tool and it would benefit using it across the grade levels, we can definitely look into that and discuss that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'd just add, the primary benefit is to make sure that we have a universal screener for gifted for first grade. The benefit of using it in first grade as well, though, is because it is non-language based. We're hoping that we can see, also for our early learners, we can see students who have high levels of critical thinking, reasoning that might have some language deficits. So we think it will have some carryover to our early learner reading information as well, if that helps.
And I think I'm still thinking about it. I mean, I guess maybe one very high level question is it one assessment that would be appropriate to all ages?
They're right. They say they have one for each grade level.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
And this is a brand new assessment that you guys had a conversation about this, right?
Yes, we did. It is relatively new. So we have looked at some districts that have fielded it. We think first grade is the logical place to put it to see how it tests. And then as we learn more about it, it might be something that we look to for future use as well.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, program evaluation, ESL by Crystal Swoboda.
Hi, how's everybody doing tonight?
Good, how are you?
I'm okay. I just got on here, so I'm sorry for the complication. I do have permission to share the screen, right?
You should, yes.
Okay, all right. So hold on one second. I had a little issue getting into the building, so I'm sorry, everybody. Okay, there we go. Now, let's see. Don't judge me by how many tabs I have open. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Awesome. All right, so the ESL program evaluation is something that we do in order to just let people know where we are as far as the program design is and basic information about the program. And so if you are new and you haven't heard me talk about ESL before, I want you to know that there are many different program names. We use MRH ESOL, which stands for English for Speakers of Other Languages. I like that one because many of our students are multilingual. So the objective of the program is to teach English to students whose first home language is not English. And it is a Tier 2 intervention program. And our students are typically from other countries, but we do have quite a few students who are actually born in America and have another language that's spoken at home, which qualifies them for the program. We follow the LAU plan, and the LAU plan it's similar to what I would say is like documentation and guaranteeing that we are giving English language learners a equitable opportunity to education. And the basis of a LAU plan is that we, as teachers and as administrators, we have to ensure that we are giving everyone an opportunity, no matter their cultural background, language. We're giving all students opportunities to gain the English language knowledge, but specifically within academic language. Social language can be learned through community, but academic language is arguably one of the most, I would say, the biggest standout feature when it comes to academic success for ESL students. So our discourse is very dominant in academic language teaching. We do have a steady incline of ESL learners. So every year that I've been here, and I've been here for 7 years now, we have slowly but surely, I mean, we're a small school district, we know, but we are getting more and more students, and especially newcomers. And when I say newcomers, these are students that are either refugees and immigrants that have absolutely no English language skills at all. So 0%, they are fully fluent in their home language, and that is it. So within just this year, and specifically in one semester, which is semester 2 this year, 21-22, we received 13 newcomer students. And that is, it really makes an impact on how what we do as teachers when all of a sudden in mid-semester we receive 13 students that can't speak English. So it takes a lot of time, but with the help of International Institute, also Student Services, Vince Estrada, Rachel Ward, you're my peoples. They are awesome. We work as a team and we make sure that all services are given to the students that qualify. When a student is tested for English language, they usually have to do a screening, and we call it the WIDA screener. And if they do the home language survey in the beginning when they're signing up for school, they would mark, yes, there's another language spoken at home. And then right when we know that as administration, we see that, and then we will go ahead and test that student. And once the student is tested, they are put into a program. And I'm putting this on here just so you guys can kind of see how each school is individually broken up and how we give our minutes based on the level of language. So I'm not going to go through all of it, but this is here for you to look at. But it is important to realize that when you go into the secondary education and you have newcomer students, I want you to see the difference that we provide students 800 minutes a week. So there's 2 whole blocks, 86-minute each blocks of just English only instruction. So it takes a lot of time. And typically that is because everything is credit bearing, and they have a limited amount of time to receive language services before they have to graduate. Our ESL courses are, like I said earlier, they are very dominant in the approach of vocabulary instruction and specific with academic language. So all of our language standards have to do with subject content areas. So we have, for example, standard 1 would be social instructional language. Standard 2 is language and social studies. Standard 3 is language and science, so on and so forth. So we are very particular on how we create our curriculum. We basically, what we take is what the students are learning in their regular classes, and we're modifying the curriculum based on the students' needs. And there's even more to an ESL job than just teaching, though. We are definitely like social workers. I would say I've spent a lot of time, and I love it. This is why I love my job. But the cultural transition assistance part of it is the beauty of MRH, because we already do the home visits. That's a norm. So what I do for these students, for me to go into their homes and learn about their culture and learn about the specific background of the student, does so much more than just looking at a score. So there are significant factors in how we do things at MRH that just make our ESL program so strong. And I am proud to be here. Also, Vince Estrada, is he on here? Yeah, okay. Vince, he does a huge job when it comes to cultural transition. He makes sure that we always have translators available. So whenever we're doing home visits, we always have someone that can speak their home language. And anytime we're doing meetings, conferences, Vince Estrada is on it. So thank you. I need you. So anyway, the courses, though, I just want to basically say we are teaching at the level that is appropriate to the student. So it's really important that if we have high school students, for example, and they don't have English language, we're not going to give them books that are, Fred rode the bike. We have to give them books and content that is going to be specific to their interest, their age level, and that's appropriate. So a lot of our program design is made to give that student that beginning language structure with content that's appropriate for their age. Sorry, my mom is calling me. Okay, I got it on silent now. All right. Oh, these are the standards I was talking about. So since I've already brought them up, they are here for you to look at if you need to. These are the proficiency levels, and our program's designed on 4 domains, which is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. And so for every level, depending on where the student tests, we are given these WIDA scores, access scores, that tell us specifically where the student lands in listening, where the student lands in speaking. These scores are very important for us to look at because we break it down for the teachers that need that information, that are working with the students. And we give this what we call can-do descriptors to the teachers so they understand where that student is, like where exactly they need to be making accommodations, where they should be assessing them. And so when I give these goals to the teachers, this is really important for them to understand. And we do PD sessions on this every year. And we describe, how the WIDA access score works, and we give professional development on how to accommodate students' needs. And by the way, I just did one at elementary and it went really well. Can't wait to do it again. So our goals in our curriculum are broken down in communication skills for social instructional language. So when we think about personal expression, we're talking about how are they able to communicate with their peers? How are they fitting in with our school atmosphere? How's that transition going? So that whole personal expression part is super important because that's what's going to help them gain the expressive language that they need. Life skills are also taught. And like I said, we're much like social workers. We're teaching more than just language. We teach them how to open a bank account. We teach them how to set up a billing service. Like there's lots of things that go into ESL that you as a teacher wouldn't know until you're in it. And it is one of the most gratifying things to help these families with. Again, with the program, we have 2 other goals that we work on, and which is their comprehension, and that is specifically with complex language structures and academic vocabulary. And we also do content application, and that is let me give you an example. In secondary education, we have a class called ESOL content, and that class is specifically geared towards helping the students with specific content area needs. And they also take an English only class as well. We do have exit criteria that I created. Super proud of it. It's called the SCSR. It's a standard checking system for reclassifying ELLs. Reclassifying means putting them on another level or exiting them out of the program. When you look at this, and I'm only going to go over this briefly because it's a lot. Okay. So I don't want to overload you on the specifics, but I want you to understand that this is a criteria that is very, very important for us to be accountable. We use this to understand and transition students when they go from ECC to elementary to middle school. These teachers need some sort of model to look at and have all that information ready for them to accurately assess where the student is and whether we should move them forward. So we use tests like SRIs, WIDA, ACT, Aspire, EOC, STAR. We use that data. We also use observational data such as active and inactive participation in the classroom. We also use their grades and attendance. So we take all of these things in consideration when we are thinking about moving that student on to the next level. So if you look here, the program design is based on, like I was just saying, assessment It's on observational data, grades, and attendance. We also do an exit interview and then we exit the student. So that's the typical cycle that we would go through when exiting. And why can't I, hold on a second. Let me go back to that. This thing, I had it, Roxana, I swear to you, I linked it and it did not link. Hold on. This was a presentation I had to do for my master's program, by the way. So anyway, good Lord. Yeah, it should lead me there. Well, you know
So I
what?
think you can
That's
just-
okay. Doesn't matter. Like I said, I don't want to go through all this anyway, because it really just, all you really need to know is that we have criteria that you can access, and I will give you a link that actually works, I promise you. And when you have time, you know, all the time you guys have available, you can go through here and just see the process that we use as administration and as teachers to exit the students out of the program. And going back to just closing this presentation, Roxana, I'm here with you. The exit criteria, since I couldn't go through the process with you, it's based on these points here. Like I said earlier, inactive participation, scores, standardized test results, average grades and attendance, and then the exit interview. And that is the criteria that we use to be accountable on making sure that students have all the opportunities given to them that they deserve. And that is it. So are there any questions or comments?
Priscilla?
Thank you, Crystal. Appreciate the presentation, and I do remember previous presentations from you about the program. So it's good to see the work. As far as the slide on you know, the sort of historical data on students, I think in light of some of our conversations about equity and just, you know, wondering about, you know, student growth and, you know, some of the new changes that are coming along with M-6, you know, I would be curious to dig in a little bit more into some of this data on the number of students, you know, actually exiting the program. And I do recognize, you know, like if we get a student who's placed in 11th grade, it's going to be much more challenging to exit them than a student who comes to us in first grade, right? So, you know, perhaps, and again, I know it's a very small demographic group too. So, you know, some sense of like grade level, you know, work. I'm curious about our consistency of these students too. I don't know if there's like a level of transience. I mean, it seems like maybe not because of the numbers, you know, and the growth here, but, you know, just curious about that as well. And then, you know, and maybe this is more of a question in a future conversation with Roxana or Rachel on, you know, curious about how this impacts, you know, data that we are accountable to the state on. You know, obviously, the MAP test is not going to be a good measure of a student's understanding of science if they could tell you about it in a different language than the one that is on the MAP test. So, you know, just curious a little bit more about how we think that could be impacting us, you know, and what are, I guess I'm not clear if this is probably not a group that's specifically a subgroup that is.
We can certainly, we can pull that for you. So good questions about additional data that we can certainly provide. But yeah, we can absolutely sort our data in that way.
Hey,
Right.
that was a packed full of punch questions from Ms. Kaufman.
Yes.
It
No.
was definitely inspired by a Vince Estrada deep
No,
dive into
but it was
demographic data.
great stuff. And Crystal, that was a great presentation. I would say we can easily track. I'm also curious about the amount of time these students have been with us, to kind of see if there is some student mobility. My intuition, my hypothesis is that there are some of our English language learners that are here for a long time
Mhm.
and end up exiting, and people and some students that are only here for a short time. And so I'd be interested in seeing that as well. You're absolutely right. The newcomer in high school is the most challenging person to serve. The clock is ticking. We have to figure out how to get them credits. And while the number of students is growing, it's not. It does challenge the program design. Are we doing pull out or push ins and those kind of things? So our
So
team is always looking at ways to really efficiently serve these students.
two things I would just point out later tonight, we'll bring to you in the hiring section, we will be increasing the ESL positions by 0.5, which is a planned increase that you should be aware of. And also, I just want to commend Crystal. I know that she went briefly through what she created, but our team through this program evaluation and Crystal through her graduate work, I cannot express enough how proud I am of the team for looking holistically at children and making sure that when we're moving levels, we've not just looked at a WIDA score, which is what a lot of schools do, but we've looked at them comprehensively in terms of how they're settling, how they're engaging, how they are social emotionally responding to life. And so the process that our team has put together is really quite exceptional, and I've not really seen anything like it in other school districts. And I just want to say that publicly to you. Thank you, Crystal. I know it was a lot of work, but I know you guys take that very seriously.
I just want to let you guys know I plan on patenting this idea. So we're gonna, and you're right, Roxana. I've never went into any school that had an exit criteria like this. And thank you for saying that, because I did work really hard on it, and I'm sorry I couldn't show you, but I'll get that link fixed and you can see all that hard work. I promise you. And by the way, the monitored section here, it's not what you're asking for. I know that you want specific demographic data, and I would love to see that myself. I think that's definite need, so we can break that down. But here, if you look, like for example, 2019, 2020, we have 23 students that are monitored. That means they are exited the program. So out of the 68 students, 23 of them are monitored. And that means that they've successfully graduated out, went through our exit criteria, but that is a general like district-wide number. And I would like to see like the specifics in grade levels and, in respect to, our transient students, or are they students that are staying here? So I agree with you on that. That's a great idea. And I think it would go really well in putting this data into our tracker system as well.
Thank you, Crystal.
Thanks, Crystal.
I have one quick question about growth. Crystal and Vince, in terms of the jump that we saw this year, are you aware through our relationship with International Institute if we should continue to expect, sort of based on geopolitical forces, that we're going to continue to see this level of increase over a short or longer term period?
So from the enrollment side, I haven't really seen a discernible pattern. For example, obviously there's been a lot of difficulties and hardship and heartache in parts of the world, in Ukraine and Afghanistan specifically, in the last calendar year. But we've only enrolled one family from those two countries. We continue to see Spanish-speaking families as our probably largest group. In fact, we enrolled a Spanish-speaking family today. Two more newcomers to add to your list, Ms. Swoboda. So I haven't seen a pattern, honestly. And in talking with the International Institute, it's interesting because Maplewood's affordability in the housing market is less than it was in 2009-10, and particularly for larger families. It's difficult to find rental property in this community for large families that are affordable. So I don't know the International Institute is looking here quite as much as they used to, quite frankly. So I think what happens with learners coming here is that because I think word of mouth spreads and that people have had a good experience in general. and they will tell folks to come here if they can. And there's been some sponsor families, things like that, but no big patterns that I can really discern. Crystal, would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I agree. We did have a pretty big grant that was given to our city of St. Louis that is going to supply schools with funding, more funding for Afghanistan refugees and Ukrainian refugees. So in the future, within, I would say, the next couple of years, we're going to see an increase in the St. Louis area. But typically what happens in my experience is they go to transitional schools such as Bayless and
Naheed Chapman.
Naheed Chapman,
Great
and they'll
school.
go there first for about 6 months to a year, and then they'll transfer out. So we always get like a what is that called? A delay. So to speak. So, you know, right when the refugees are coming in, it's going to be about a year until we start receiving those students. So that's just a little bit of background on how the Syrian refugee crisis kind of worked out with us. And I assume, based on what I've experienced, that might be the same kind of factor that we're going to be looking at.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Okay. Program evaluation, K through 6 reading program. Courtney, Stephanie, and Mindy.
And Kristen.
Oh, and Kristen. That wasn't on my list. I'm sorry.
No, it's no problem.
Thank
Just wanted
you.
to make sure she was included. I'm going to share my screen. Sorry.
Okay. Well, good evening. I'm here with the ECC reading specialists and our K-6 literacy coach, and they will introduce themselves as they speak tonight. I'm Cindy Hebenstreit, and this year I'm serving as the transitional coordinator. So we're here with you, and these people will introduce themselves when they speak. I will mention, though, Sarah Gillum and Angela Mitchell are the elementary reading specialists, and they were participating in the various studies that we're going to talk about. And also, we have worked very closely with Tammy Romberg, who is our literacy consultant. Those three people are not here with us tonight, but I want to make sure we mention them because they did a great deal of work in supporting our effort. So I thought it was really important that we start off with this quote from Maya Angelou. Do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. It was important to me that we have this as part of our messaging because since I've been here in 2001, we've worked really hard in the area of literacy and writing, in addition to all the other subject areas. So when we talk about strengthening our phonics and phonemic awareness and phonological awareness program as part of this presentation, I want to be really clear, it hasn't been missing. This is about strengthening it. And as we've learned more over time about how children learn best to read and write, we've improved our practice. And so this is this is the next step in improving our practice, particularly in the area of phonics, phonemic awareness, and phonological awareness. So why are we here? In the K-6 literacy program evaluation that Laura Brassis brought to all of you in March of 2020, right before the shelter-in-place order, she highlighted the need for the selection of a K-2 phonics, phonological, and phonemic awareness foundational resource, which would bring us continuity in our practice, K-6. So the ECC and elementary reading specialists convened a joint study of Kilpatrick, which you'll hear a little bit about, and Blevins to strengthen our knowledge base. This is an area that Tammy Romberg worked very closely with us on. And also Laura Brassis had led a study at ECC in 2019, 2020 with Blevins' text, A Fresh Look at Phonics. So as we gained more knowledge in this area, we went through a curriculum review process. And the goal was to find a foundational resource that would work well with our philosophy and fit with our current literacy practices and would strengthen our Tier 1 core literacy curriculum for all students. We developed a set of criteria to select the programs that would make it into our actual review process. So we went from approximately 8 programs down to 4 programs, and eventually we made a choice based on, again, what would fit with our literacy philosophy and what the research was telling us was a strong program. So the other piece of this was we realized we needed to strengthen the teacher's instructional capacity to teach phonics through a systematic and explicit approach. And so in order to do that, once again, I'm going to mention Tammy Romberg's name because she brought to us the letters training. She made us aware of this. And I believe Kristen Kottner also had knowledge of this program. And the acronym stands for Language Essentials for Teachers of Reading and Spelling. And it was something that really spoke to me and resonated with me because over my time here, I felt while we were receiving high quality professional development in specific programs such as Fontes and Pinnell, Lucy Calkins, we didn't have that program that was actually teaching about the science of reading. And so the letters training is exactly that. It's not a specific program. It's really building teacher capacity about how children learn to read.
Sorry.
It's okay.
I'm Mindy McBride, and I am one of the reading specialists at ACC. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about the data that we have, that we looked at to kind of help guide us as well. So each year at 3 points of the year, we look at the data and we determine, which students are eligible to enter or exit intervention. And we were finding that at the end of kindergarten, we really didn't have a whole lot of children in intervention. But then at the beginning of first grade, we were having a huge increase in students in intervention. And so it made us kind of start to wonder why that was. And after really digging in deeper, we were realizing that the students just weren't the foundational skills that they were learning in kindergarten. They just weren't really, really deep enough for them to hold on to them throughout the summer. So this data here on this slide is just showing the percentage of students that were below grade level in kindergarten, and then this percentage of students that were below grade level at the beginning of first grade. Now, granted, we do know that COVID is in the midst of all of this, but at the same time, those percentages are still there and they continue to increase every year. That gap continues to increase each year. So that made us really start to wonder what we needed to do next. So then we also dug a little bit deeper into the first grade data, which is on the next slide. And this is just 2 of the 6 first grade classes, but what we noticed is that all 6 of them looked almost identical. So this is just kind of a snippet of it. So these 5 categories are from the early lit test in reading. And these are the foundational reading skills. So it's really small. So I'll tell you the first one is alphabetic principle, then concepts of words, visual discrimination, phonemic awareness, and phonics. And you'll see in both classes, and like I said, as well as the other 4 classes, the phonemic awareness and phonics skills were our lowest achieving scores. So it made us realize again that this is something that we really need to start focusing in on and helping build our teacher capacity so that we can really get our students where they needed to be.
Hey everybody, I'm Courtney Miller. I'm the literacy coach. I want to talk a little bit about the data we're seeing in the upper grades. We have been focusing typically at the older grades a lot on comprehension. That's the point of learning to read, right? That you understand what you've read. And that's still going to continue to be a focus. But what we were finding is that students who were showing us that they were struggling with some reading skills based on This data points students at the 30th percentile or below on the STAR. We dug a little deeper with those students struggling with reading comprehension, and we found that of those students, 61% didn't meet the benchmark for phonemic awareness, 17.5% didn't meet the phonics benchmark for one-syllable words, and 42.5% did not meet the benchmark for two-syllable words. So it was really showing us that while we will continue to work on comprehension strategies, a lot of our students that are struggling with reading and comprehension, an underlying factor may very well be that they are lacking some of these foundational skills. So we're seeing this all the way up through 6th grade and definitely beyond that as well. So as Cindy mentioned, we have had lots of resources that we've been using to kind of research what we can do and what should be next. So these are just a few quotes, and I certainly will not read those to you, as you can read them yourself. But some things, some big takeaways from Fresh Look at Phonics, Equipped for Reading Success, and some things from our letters training. But I do want to draw your attention to this graphic over on the right-hand side of the screen, the ladder of reading. I know it's a little small, but if you look at the top, the greenish color, those are students that are going to learn to read relatively easily, with whatever you're doing. And these new tools we're planning to embed these foundational literacy skills will certainly help them as well. But these were kids that were doing okay kind of no matter what. In the red here, these are students that we were typically picking up either in reading intervention services and notice that we're struggling. These students were receiving phonics and phonemic awareness instruction, but as you keep hearing us say, it wasn't that systematic, it wasn't explicit. A lot of it was embedded in what we do. A lot of it wasn't always uniform. So we think that having a program like what was recommended after the 2020 evaluation will really help us all be on the same page to get that explicit, systematic, uniform instruction to reach these kiddos that research is saying need that. And we're also hoping that our population that it has dyslexia or has tendencies for dyslexia, this will reach them as well.
Good evening. I'm Stephanie Sissel, and I'm a reading specialist at ECC also. And as we were learning together through our book studies and PD and data dives and classroom observations, the following theory of change emerged. If we ensure students equitably receive consistent, systematic, and explicit instruction in phonics and foundational literacy in the K-6 ELA Tier 1 setting, overall reading comprehension will improve. And so we are hoping that these anticipated outcomes will happen as a result of our theory of change. And that is that we will strengthen curriculum in areas of phonological awareness, phonics, spelling, and related foundational skills. We will ground curriculum in scientific research of how students learn to read and write. We will increase students' foundational literacy skills. We will improve literacy scores across all diverse populations. We will reduce the number of students requiring Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions, and we will prepare our students to be literate citizens. So this school year, as was mentioned before, several teachers and reading specialists began letters training, and letters training is a 2-year program. So we just finished our first year. And these are the things that letters gave us. It grounded us in the science of reading research. It strengthened the capacity of the teachers in foundational reading instruction. It provided a scope and sequence for phonological awareness and instruction. It promoted the transfer of knowledge to the classroom. And it breaks down the components of phonics instruction and how they work together to build a successful decoding skills and comprehension of text. And what we ended up doing is teachers that participated in this letters training took a survey at the beginning before they had taken any of the letters training, and then they took a survey after this first year. And what we found is that they were asked to rate their level of knowledge and comfort of teaching literacy. And at the end of the year, the survey, that all teachers noted a significant notice a significant noticed a significant change in these areas, and teachers decided that they were more confident in teaching foundational literacy.
Hi, my name is Kristen Kottner, and I am also a reading specialist at ECC. So as part of our study of foundational literacy skills, we had determined we needed to adopt a published program resource for our teachers to support them in providing this instruction to students in the classroom. So after reviewing several different programs, we determined that the two I'm going to talk about now are the best two, and we're recommending that we adopt those. So the first one is Foundations, and it is a comprehensive program that includes a bit of phonological awareness, phonics, and handwriting and spelling, the alphabetic principle, and it can be used. One of the great things about it is that it can be used in our Tier 1 setting in all of the classrooms, but we can also use it in a more intense way with our students who need reading intervention in a Tier 2 or Tier 3 setting. The program offers a lot of support for our teachers, but it also leaves room for them to use what they know about their students to make instructional decisions. And as part of the program, it comes with geodes, which are high quality decodable texts, so that just like we've done in the past, we have students read books that are appropriate for what they're learning in small groups. And we will now have these decodable texts that align to what we're teaching with the Foundations program. It also offers a lot of support that we can send home for parents to understand what the students are learning, and also activities that they can do with their children at home. And so one area that Foundations is not very strong in is the phonemic and phonological awareness. And we know that that's very important for our students. So we would also recommend supplementing Foundations with a program called Heggerty. It is all oral instruction. So it's just a teacher's guide, and the students will participate orally and with hand motions to help them with multisensory learning. It's fairly simple for our teachers to implement, but it has a really strong impact for our students' learning. It is intended to help them with their manipulation of sounds, things such as learning to rhyme and add and delete and substitute sounds, which will in turn help them with being able to decode words and spell words. And through the adoption of these two programs, Foundations and Heggerty, we are hoping to strengthen our existing curriculum in preschool through third grade. And we will continue to use Lucy Calkins as our primary resource for the workshop structure. We are not getting rid of that. We're just adding to what we already have. And we hope to continue increasing teacher capacity so that they are able to make some of the instructional decisions with the new knowledge they'll gain. And again, we want to strengthen the model we already have. We just want to add in all of the new research that we're learning so that we can continue to make the best decisions for our students. So these are our formal recommendations. As was mentioned, we have already had teachers begin going through letters training, but now that we've seen the impact of that training, we'd like to have all of our teachers preschool through 6th grade who teach literacy in some capacity learn all of the same great things we've been learning in letters. So we're recommending they all go through that. And we would like to implement Foundations and Heggerty in our classrooms. Foundations would be implemented in preschool through 3rd grade as part of the Tier 1 instruction, and Heggerty will start in kindergarten and go through 3rd grade. So with the new program adoptions, we will no longer use spelling connections and handwriting without tears in those grade levels, because these new programs will replace that instruction. We will continue to use spelling connections in 4th through 6th grade, as the students in those grade levels are learning more about word study, things such as vocabulary and morphology and word origin, and spelling connections meets that need for the students in those grades at this time. We are recommending that we begin to collect and analyze data, or continue to collect and analyze data to determine the effectiveness of this program adoption over time. And continue to build our menu of interventions. So as we learn more about the science of how children learn to read and write, we can make sure that our interventions align to all of that knowledge in kindergarten through 6th grade. And one last thing I wanted to mention is today we did get to meet with our teachers in kindergarten through 2nd grade and show them a lot of these new resources, and the feedback we got was very positive. Teachers are very excited and eager to implement this in their classrooms.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about the budget. The letters training for our first cohort, we used Lexia, the company that supports letters training. And as we look ahead to next year and our first cohort being in year 2, when this presentation was completed, the virtual training cost would be $12,000. And there were certainly options for our ESSER funds and our title funds to offset those costs. But since this presentation, the state of Missouri has announced their new initiative, Read, Lead, and Exceed. And it is about $35 million directed towards literacy support for students in the state of Missouri. So one of the things that this initiative is supporting is letters training throughout the state of Missouri. So we're definitely on the right track. And I am working with Heather Knight at DESE to determine if they will have the 2nd year training available through this initiative next year. If not, I have also learned that Ed Plus will have an opportunity for us to participate in the Volume 2 training at a cost that is less than the $12,000. So we have a couple of options. And again, even though if we would have had to have gone with Lexia, we do have funds through ESSER and Title to offset those
It absolutely can. It would be fully funded through our ESSER drawdown. We have a category specifically for this type of training and work for students in learning recovery.
And the administrators, the principal and assistant principal at the ECC and the elementary, along with possibly our literacy coach and or one of our reading specialists will go through the administrative training. You can see the cost there. It's an executive overview of what the teachers will be learning through Volume 1 and Volume 2 training, or Year 1 and Year 2 training. It helps build the skill set of the administrator to know what to look for and to understand what is going to be happening in the classroom based on the new knowledge that teachers are gaining. And then future cohorts, if we go with Ed Plus, there would be materials cost. It would be the same situation and the same exact cost if we go through Lexia. The only way or one way that the cost will be reduced for materials is through this new initiative by the state of Missouri. So this is the high end of the budget. It will probably be much less than this. Okay. And then when we were talking about foundations and Hegarty, I do want to make one point that it's not exactly that the foundations is weak in phonological and phonemic awareness. It's just the extent to which it provides students the opportunity to engage with those activities will be strengthened if we add Hegarty in. So I don't want to leave you with the idea that foundations is not a strong source for that. It's just our instruction be strengthened and the students will have more opportunity to be immersed in developing those skills if we have the two partnered together. So having said that, we have the foundations materials for K-1-2 budgeted for. The funds, again, from Title and ESSER offset the costs for those materials and for the virtual training, which the K-1-2 teachers will take in June. And mostly on our snow makeup day, which worked out really well. And then the 3rd grade materials will be purchased next year for implementation the following year. I'm not sure if we said that clearly enough to you, but it was strongly recommended to us by our foundations reps from Wilson Language that we not do an initial implementation at third grade, that would be better to wait 1 year. So next year, the third grade will have spelling connections and they will have handwriting without tears, and then they will transition the following year to using foundations. The preschool materials cost is relatively inexpensive, and actually we've been able to cover those costs now through additional Head Start funding that just was made available to us because they had an overage. So between the title funds, the ESSER funds, and now the Head Start funding, we really have been able to address these costs very effectively.
We also are able to save money at K1 and 2 by not having spelling connections and handwriting without tears anymore, which cost quite a bit of money yearly.
It was approximately an annual cost between ECC and the elementary of more than $20,000, and we will not have that cost any longer. So the final part of our presentation is to share with you the highlights of our K-6 literacy program evaluation that I know you received a copy of through board docs. And I'm going to turn it over to Courtney. She is also our K-6 literacy CAT leader. And so she's going to share the highlights of the revisions to that plan.
You know, as we said, this is adding some tools, you know, for us to use. Our philosophy hasn't changed. Our rationale hasn't changed. We were able to expand some of the descriptions around our foundational literacy instruction to reflect some of these changes. We revised some language around small group instruction. We've now learned a lot about how using decodable texts and not just level text can be a really helpful tool for children. So we included that as well. And then just updated the pacing guides, our dyslexia screening document. If what Rachel presented is approved, we'll move that in there as well. And some enter and exit criteria for our intervention program. So again, a lot of it's staying the same, just expanded some descriptors and revised some language to kind of reflect some of the changes we've talked to you about today.
Right, thank you, Courtney. And one area I forgot to mention was that we have also in this past year budgeted quite a bit of additional funding for teachers and classroom libraries and our reading specialists to have more text for our students who have English as a second language, and also more multicultural literature. And I wanted to add that in. So what questions, are there any questions that you have?
Just thank you to the team. I know it was a very comprehensive look. I know that you've been working through COVID, trying to make sure that what we're seeing in the data for our students is addressed. And you've provided, I think, a really comprehensive program that's allowed us to use the funds that were set aside for just this purpose in the most effective way. So thank you to the team.
Great. Thank you, everyone.
I do have a quick question. How long do we think that there will be funding that helps us fund this program moving forward?
So we have funding from ESSER for 1 more year. Title we get every year, but the nice thing about this program, unlike what we were using with Spelling Connections, which is an annual cost, once we purchase this program, there will not be annual recurring costs. We may have to do some additional training for teachers who need the diagnostic training, but that cost will be minimal after the initial purchase. So I think ESSER and Title should take care of you for the foreseeable future.
Okay, so now is really the best time to purchase then?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
If I could just add one other piece very quickly. Courtney Miller and Stephanie Sassel will also take the facilitator training. And so actually, after they take the training this summer, they will do the training. It will be in-house training. Courtney will work with the elementary and Stephanie will work with ECC, and they will continue to do the letters training. So there will only be the materials costs.
Thank you very much. Did anyone else have any questions? We appreciate you.
Thank you. It's my final board presentation. Good night, and thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Strategic Planning Services Selection. It doesn't tell me who's leading it.
I can speak to that. You saw both presentations last month, and so I don't know that you would have any additional questions, but based on the presentations, the team is recommending Insight.
It's just we're voting on that today, right?
Correct.
Okay. Did anyone have any questions?
I understand Dr. Jameson was able to negotiate on the price, so that's reflected there too.
That is correct.
Highlighting that.
Thank you. Okay, admin communications, COVID update.
Vince Estrada is going to give the COVID update tonight.
Yay, Vince.
Vince, you're still on mute.
Dang, rookie mistake. Jeez. You guys can see the screen?
Yes.
So I'll give you guys a COVID update. Looking at kind of case rates, interesting data. So the case rates have increased since early mid-April for sure, both regionally and locally. Hospitalizations not tracking as high as it had when the Omicron variant hit St. Louis in December, January, but the case rates have increased significantly. You can see from April 7th through May 12th, that's a five times increase in case rates. And that's reflective in the Department of Health and Senior Services COVID-19 report. St. Louis County is, you can see the red arrow, is in a medium risk, and that medium risk is, they use metrics around case rates and hospitalizations, and I would imagine the contributing factor there on the metric side is probably on the case rate, since hospitalizations are still relatively low. St. Louis City is low. St. Charles, our neighboring counties are low, but St. Louis County is in the medium range, and one of only a handful of counties that are recording that as such. More locally on the zip code side, 55 new cases in the past 14 days in the 117, which is a Richmond Heights community, and 31 cases in the 143. Just to give you some context, comparing that to the last board meeting in April, we had 24 cases in the 117, so that's a 56% increase over last month. And we had 16 cases in the 143, that represents a 48% increase in cases. So while this is not December, January, we have noticed an increase in numbers, and we're feeling it in our schools a little bit, as you know, because we reinstated masks. ECC went back to masks at the beginning of last week, in the high school, middle school, and elementary went back to masks this week. Those numbers, the way we calculate positive cases is the 5 days of isolation plus the 5 days of masking required by the CDC. We updated those numbers today. They're at 6 cases at the active cases at the ECC, which puts them right at 1%. As of today, 4 cases at the elementary, which puts them at 0.8, and 11 cases at the high school, which puts them at about 1.54. But I want to tell you about the data dashboard. Myself and our nursing staff look at that data multiple times a day. We're always diving into that number. We keep an internal dashboard, and our nursing team does a fantastic job, not only recording who's tested positive for COVID-19, but also tracking people who are out absent, that had some symptoms. They're going out for testing. They're great about following up, so we really can get a full picture of who's kind of struggling with the COVID-19. And those are our overall number rates. Interestingly, as I'm going to probably do a deep dive in our data when we get done at the end of the year. But right now, I think between staff and students in all our buildings, roughly between 18 and 22% of all persons have had COVID-19 this school year. Vaccination report. These are kind of regional numbers for fully vaccinated everyone, the whole pool of eligible folks, 72.4% in St. Louis County, 66% in St. Louis City, and 17.9% in St. Charles County. Looking at our numbers, I love them now. They're more accurate. Thing that was really encouraging is our overall school district vaccination rate of 78.8. That includes all eligible students and staff. And that compares favorably to the 72.4% in St. Louis County. And in fact, I think it's even a stronger number than that, because what contributes to that relatively high number here in the county is the number of seniors that are vaccinated. That's the highest vaccination rate of all age groups. And we don't have any seniors in this particular group, people over the age of 65 specifically. So it really, I think a really strong number, both in terms of the overall district and whether our students are at 75%, which is kind of where we thought we'd land. So those are really positive trends. And I think that's it. I think it was one other slide. Okay, no, that's it. And then in our mitigating measures for the benefit of our community and our board, no change there. Except we reinstated masks in all 3 of our buildings this week, and we're at the 1% positivity rate, which is on the low end compared to our neighbors. Many of our neighbors have gone back to masking this last week or so, and a couple of our buildings are at over 1.5%. And I think what happens with the positivity rate is that 1% is the ones we know about. There's always folks that don't know they have COVID that are also in our spaces. So I think that's while conservative and safe, I think it's a good number for us to kind of stay with for now. And the final thing I wanted to mention is Dr. Jason Newland, who's been a terrific partner with us, reached out earlier in the week and wanted to know if we were interested in participating in a project with WashU physicians. They got a grant from MRH. It does a couple of things. It really helps provide good public health information to our families and community around testing and vaccination so that people can, so we're trying to reach those groups that are really hesitant to both get tested and consider vaccinations. And also they would provide some free testing for us next year. And they would even come to the school and even go to people's homes if necessary. So we got a copy of that memorandum of agreement. I actually attached it to the superintendent weekly board notes earlier today. So if you guys want to take a peek at it, it's actually only 2 pages. Like, I'm like, I can actually read that. Some of those memorandums can be pretty dense, but it's 2 pages, super straightforward. He's a great partner, and our central office administrative team is taking a peek at it. But I think it looks pretty positive for us, no cost to the district, and another good partner, another good resource for our families, and potentially could address some equity issues around information around vaccines and access to testing. That's all I had. Any questions about COVID?
I don't have a question, but that was a really good update, Vince. I really appreciated that.
You're welcome.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, the one thing I had the professional fortune to be in a room with the City of St. Louis Health Director earlier this week. And I think one of to Vince's point about the positivity numbers that we're recording as a district are the ones that we know about, and we have to kind of assume that there are others. I mean, I think the part of the public health challenge right now is that so many folks are testing at home and there is no mechanism for that information to be collected. So, I think it is likely that the community conditions are even more challenged than, the numbers that are putting us in the medium zone or whatever it is now at St. Louis County reflect. So again, just encouraging folks to stay vigilant. Let's make it through these last few weeks of school, and hopefully folks stay healthy and take precautions over the summer as well.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning Ms. Kaufman. I think that just in terms of patterns, we haven't really seen, the only pattern we've seen consistently is the high transmission rate within families. Usually when we get a call from a family, they're reporting that an adult member of the household and a child both tested positive, had symptoms. Unless they can really catch it early and isolate right away, it's likely that there are going to be some other members. That's been the most consistent thing we've seen. School transmission is always a little tricky to discern because now people are socializing more, and I get it. I do understand it, but there are more birthday parties, sleepovers, things like that, and that's all understandable. So I think, it's just hard to really determine patterns other than family household transmissions are still very high, and understandably so. But thankfully the hospitalizations still are remaining low, which has been good. And thank you for letting me share this information in a long board meeting. Any other questions at all? All right, thank you all.
Thank you, Vince.
You're welcome.
Construction update, Randy.
Good evening, everyone. I'll try to make this pretty quick because Ed always has the pictures that are much more enjoyable to look at. In terms of just finances, where we stand, we've completed work and paid for work worth roughly $8 million. That represents about 41% of the contracted work. Of the contingency funds that we have set aside for the unexpected things that pop up, we've currently obligated just under 600,000, which represents about 45% of the contingency funds available to us. So again, completed work is setting at about 41%. Use of contingency funds is now at about 45%. There's one large change that just was just included in the contingency issue. Has to do with security cameras, access controls, and so on throughout the new addition that will be built. That change alone is just about $65,000. It hasn't been priced down to the penny yet, but I have included that in these numbers just so we do a better job of keeping track of where we are. So we'll keep a close eye on it. But as Chris has always reminded me, budget's tight, so we'll watch it closely. In terms of timeline, we've been talking a lot about the electrical service has been something that slowed us down. The new electrical gear is all installed and it is actually energized and up and running now. So we're still on the old service, but we're in the process of switching over to the new service. That should be completed by the end of next week. The one thing you may hear about next week at the high school and middle school, we have to take the cooling tower offline. We'll first experience that Tuesday of next week. So what that means is Tuesday through Friday of next week, we will have air circulating through the system, but in many portions of the building, it will not be air conditioned air, cooled air. There'll be ventilation, but not cooled air. Fortunately, I think at least early in the week, we're going to experience some cooler days. And then the new cooling tower should be all connected to the existing piping and all what they call commissioned, basically inspected, tested, run, and be operational by the end of the week. Our principals are aware of that. We've shared that word with everybody that needs to know. We want to make sure you know about that just in case somebody across the fence in your backyard starts to bend your ear. But that's coming next week. But fortunately, the electrical service is coming along. Probably one of the more exciting areas to look at right now is the new middle school office area. What used to be the central office area, it is very near complete. There's a final inspection of the fire alarm system, the fire sprinkler system happening Monday. Once we get past that, they'll put the ceiling pads in and really put the finishing touches. If you were to walk in there now, and Ed may have some pictures of the final coat of paint is on the walls, the floor is all down, the cabinets, the casework, the reception counter are almost completely installed. So that space is very nearly complete. We have scheduled for our staff to get in there and make that space school clean right around the 31st of this month and the first couple of days of June, and be ready to receive furniture beginning on June 6th. The staff will then move into that space probably the week of June 13th, and then we will begin to work in the vacated middle school office space upstairs. So that's coming along well. Down in the old boiler room area, the teen kitchen and the well, which is actually just behind the cafeteria. Now that the electrical service is operational, we can begin to demolish the old electrical, what they call switch gear, all the circuits and all the complex equipment. Once that's out of the way, we can continue work on the teen kitchen. That is scheduled to be complete probably late July, but it should be open right at the beginning of the year for student use. The vestibule just outside the new middle school entrance, you may have noticed a lot of work going on there. Footings, foundations are about to be poured for the ADA ramp that will allow people to get from that level down into the courtyard. And of course, the vestibule, the canopy and entry for the middle school entrance, that'll all be done this summer. So work is progressing. You may have noticed the brick veneer and the windows are in place there as well. Locker rooms, those were completely demolished. New brick walls are up, all the plumbing, the electrical's in there. And again, some of the work has stopped there as we focused on more critical areas, but that area will be ready for the winter sports season this winter. The gym lobby also is on about that same track. It should be ready, complete about the beginning of basketball season, roughly. The media center, which is the reason we're all virtual tonight, is pretty much all the shelving has been dismantled. The books are out of there. Demolition work will begin probably the day after, well, the Monday after students are no longer with us for the year. And again, that work will be done in time for us to reoccupy that space and be ready for the opening of school in the fall. Some work then that will occur this summer, as I said, remodeling the old middle school office area and the classroom spaces. There's several of the restrooms will be remodeled this summer and ready for student use when we return. And there'll be some work on the main parking lot, which also will begin shortly after students leave for summer break. That's just a quick highlight of what's going on. If you get a chance to peek in and see firsthand some of the things that are going on. Oh, I think I skipped over the cafeteria expansion. Sorry. You probably noticed a lot of steel being erected in that area. We had a short delay there. One of the steel trusses was damaged, had to be refabricated, but I believe the crane is supposed to be out maybe tomorrow to set that truss and get back on track with the cafeteria. And again, we're pushing that to have it open for student use when they return in the fall. I will be open to any questions unless you want to see Ed's pictures.
Thanks, Randy.
You're welcome. Thank you.
All right, Ed, you're up.
Yeah, this happened last time when I attempted to share my screen. You're not seeing anything, are you? Can I get somebody else to click on my thing and share their screen? Because it's telling me to open system preferences and I don't have time to open system preferences.
I'll give it a shot.
I'd like to ask you about that later, Chris.
Yeah, I think I know what the problem is. There it is. Come on.
So that's just what Randy was talking about. This is the new brick facade for the middle school offices. That's the sign that they swear they're going to remove and save for me from the old central office. But that's all in place now. This is the deep hole in the commons before on an extremely windy day. That's why the video looks like that. And then on the very next day, which was beautiful and blue, they brought the cement truck in and began pouring the foundation. You can see all the forms in place down there. Again, that's right outside of the old central office. So this crew looked like 10, 12 people moved into the R&D one day, and in less than, I'd say, half a day, they had all of the shelves disassembled and pretty meticulously stored. And they put those on a large moving van truck. And all of that shelving from the R&D is now, there it is now in storage. waiting to be reassembled at some point. And then in the wake, we get to see the old girls' gym from however many years ago. So now this is what Randy was talking about. The middle school office is really taking shape. This is the day they were putting tile in on the floors. In a second, you're going to see that some of the offices have the carpet down. I'm sure by now, nearly all of the offices that were going to be carpeted are carpeted. And then this is designed to give you an idea of what the new dimensions for the cafeteria will be. See how far out that comes? It's almost to the lip of the track. There's a good shot right there just to illustrate the new square footage. And of course, the light standard has been reinstalled as well after it sat on the field for all that time. That's it. Thanks, Chris.
No problem. That's about 1,600 extra square feet of cafeteria space, by the way.
Nice.
Rachel Ward played sports in that old gym. Yeah, correct, Rachel? That's what I thought.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks, Chris, for your help. Okay, pre-ACT and ACT data summary by Rachel Ward.
All right, good evening again. Can you guys see that, the PDF of the presentation? Okay. You know who I am, so I'm gonna go on here. So what I'm here today going over is our pre-ACT and ACT data. So this first slide, I'm just talking about our junior administration, the most recent administration, April of 2022, to our 11th grade students here on campus. Before I start though, we have to celebrate, we did have a student that earned a perfect score during that administration on campus as an 11th grader. So congratulations, and you can see one of Ed's stories that highlighted that if you are interested. So our overall average score, composite score for that administration was 21.6, and we had 91.76% participation rate. We had most juniors were there that day and were able to participate in the test. As you can see by the breakdown, reading was our highest average and math was our lowest. Okay, sorry. So also, as you recall earlier in the year, I presented about adding the pre-ACT to our assessment plan. So this was the first year that we administered the pre-ACT to all of our 10th grade students. The pre-ACT is a shorter version of the ACT, but it uses previously used ACT questions. So it really does mirror the ACT and gives students an idea of what they will score and how they will score on the ACT. The cool thing about that test is the results that we get, or the reports that we get, are very specific to the individual student and to the content and the strands. We actually see the questions and we see exactly which question every student answered and the correct answer and the percentage outline like that for all the standards and specific questions themselves. So some really powerful work we can do there when we dig into that. So as you can see, our average composite was 18.9. We had 94.4% participation. That 18.9 is lower than our typical average on the ACT. However, this is our first administration of pre-ACT, so I don't have any historical data to compare that to. Also, based on what I know about the pre-ACT, it really does mimic the ACT, and so it would make sense that in your 10th grade year, you may score a little bit lower than you would your 11th grade year. So those results make sense to me, but we'll keep an eye on that if we continue to administer the pre-ACT as was suggested in the assessment plan presented earlier. The interesting thing I saw here was that our reading continued to be the highest percentage. However, the English was lowest in 10th grade. So there was some work done digging in to try to figure out what that might be. The next slide looks at the average composite by ethnicity. And this has both assessments here. So it has the ACT and the pre-ACT. I have the overall, just those numbers you just saw, 21.6 and 18.9, and then the different demographic groups bars with ACT and pre-ACT side by side. What you can see here is our Black students have a lower average on both assessments by a significant amount. I will preface it that the Hispanic and Asian populations were pretty small numbers there. So just that 25 is fantastic, but I believe that was 1 or 2 students. So just when we're making conclusions, what we'd be focused on here are these Black, white, and multiracial. Gender also, so the ACT releases reports by ethnicity and gender. What is interesting here is that the ACT provides this other response rather than just male and female. This is based on how the students respond on that assessment. And so, as you can see, we're pretty not significant variation here. However, on both assessments, the other response had the highest average. I did kind of dig into this just a little bit and looked at some raw numbers just because I was interested to see the population sizes. So for the ACT, which had 78 participants, 40 identified as male, 27 identified as female, and 11 identified as other. On the pre-ACT, which had 100 participants, 53 identified as male, 34 identified as female, and 13 identified as other. So now I'm going to look at historical data with MRH compared to the state. So historically, we have scored at or above the state average. However, we have had higher participation rate than the state typically, because MRH did begin a universal administration of the ACT to our juniors in 2015, I believe it was, when the state paid for it, and then they didn't pay for it anymore. And we as a district have committed to providing that opportunity for all students. And so we have continued that administration their junior year. The drop in participation here that you can see in 2021's cohort is because that administration, so their junior year administration in 20 was canceled in April, and we offered it in October when we were still virtual and they had to come to campus. And so we did have some students that chose not to participate in that administration, but so that is why that is a little bit lower. So as you can see, compared to the state, we are hovering right at above the state average. So while we're outperforming the state, we do have, and we recognize that we have neighboring districts who are outperforming us. So we know that there is work to be done to improve these ACT scores, and we are interested in learning about what some of these districts are doing, what they've implemented, and what they're trying to get these successful. So we have Brentwood and Webster. So while we were up here closer to the 20, 21-ish range, Brentwood's a little bit closer to that 23, Webster closer to around 22, and then you have Ladue and Clayton that are closer to 26, 27 range. Also neighboring districts for us. And also I will, for all of those districts, kind of similar participation rates, because that also is a question to ask is, are they administering it to everybody? But it does look like we have pretty similar participation rates. So next steps. So we did have, there was a great faculty meeting actually that just occurred where a bunch of teachers sat down and really dug into that pre-ACT data, comparing that to some benchmark data that we have, grades, SRI scores, things like that. But in order to ensure that our work around this data and using this information is efficient and effective, we are going to be doing a district-wide professional development around establishing successful and just powerful professional learning communities. So that's going to be some work that we do moving forward. And this data will definitely be part of that. We also are going, as I already mentioned earlier in this evening, try to implement a new benchmarking tool to help us have additional data to compare and look at. And the work that's done in these groups with these department meetings, these PLCs, is just really so that teachers and administrators can examine multiple data points to ensure that our instruction is rigorous for all students. And just looking at some patterns and trends and trying to figure out what we can do to improve some of these scores for all of our students. Any questions for me about that data?
I do have a question, and I feel like I should know this. Is ACT data a measure that is factored into MSIP 6?
No.
Is that, it is not? Okay. And do we have a sense of how many of our students are going to colleges?
Actually, hang on, I'm sorry. It is not for, sorry, let me go back. ACT scores are not for our just overall standard one academic performance data. That's all MAP and EOC stuff. It is factored in on the college of career readiness component and scores. Sorry. And so their performance on the ACT does impact their college of career readiness indicator and scores for that. And we have points for that. Sorry. I was thinking about
mostly just that all of our students need a score.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Yes.
This is sort of unrelated, but I am curious, do we have a sense of how many students going on to college are going to institutions that waived the ACT or SAT requirement? And do we understand if that is becoming more pervasive as an outcome of COVID? If that's something that we should be paying attention to in terms of whether or not we invest more time and resources in this? I mean, what this data shows to me is that, like so many outcomes, ACT outcomes are so closely correlated to wealth and race. And so I want us to be sort of clear-eyed about investing significant amounts of time in data points that maybe longitudinally are less significant or might be less significant. I'm just throwing that out there for consideration without a lot of sort of understanding about where the standardized testing industry and the higher education community is currently trending on that.
Yeah, and Amber, I'd like to piggyback on that too. I appreciate certainly the information about comparison to other local districts. But I don't necessarily think that our goal here is to have the highest average ACT score that we could possibly achieve. I hope that our maybe this is something we should as a board and as administration discuss, further and set some benchmarks. I certainly want all of our students who are interested in pursuing post-secondary education to be able to do that. And I recognize that, standardized test scores are a part of that equation. But I don't think I'm going to lose sleep over a kid getting a 20 versus a 23, sort of thing. So, and I also would wonder about how many of our how prevalent it is in our district versus other districts for students to get outside tutoring support around specifically achieving top rank scores on this test.
I would just add to both of your points, it is something that I think is a hot topic among universities in terms of what acceptance look like. Also looking at testing bias, to your point, Amber, in terms of trends that we see. I think our take here has been that we want to provide access for students who see college as, we want all students to be able to be admitted to a college of their choice. And if this is one of the barriers that we can help them with in terms of providing opportunity to be familiar with what testing feels like and to be able to have a qualifying score, we certainly want to provide that. But in terms of other learning, I think to your point, we are aware of those biases and are something that we continue to watch.
And I should clarify, as a parent of rising high school students, I appreciate that the district weaves this into coursework. I think that's essential, that we allow space for families not to have to invest additional financial resources in test prep. That is critical.
To that point too, Rachel, I'm wondering, you mentioned the benefit to us around the individualized kind of reports. Do we know that students themselves are getting those individualized reports to be able to do some of their own, work?
Yeah. So, and this was our first year, so we're still kind of working that out. But those results were shared in through Mr. Castle. He actually shared them during his English 2 class to all of his sophomores or 10th graders, and they had the test booklet and kind of did a quick a quick, here's your results, here's what they mean. And then we also mailed them home. So all students should have received those in the mail. If not, we have copies. And then we have the actual test booklet that they can sit there and work through. But I also know that there was some plans. We administered this a little bit later in the year than we probably will do, than we will moving forward. So I think we administered in February. Moving forward, we'll probably do a little bit earlier in the fall. So we have more time with students to actually do some of that work, maybe in study halls and advisories, just kind of incorporated into the natural time here at school.
Hey, Rachel, on the pre-ACT, I know this is going to probably be a very basic question, but was that score a predictive score or their actual score on the ACT?
That's their score, like what their score would be on the ACT.
If they took it as it was, okay, gotcha.
But it was a shorter test. So it was like half the test, but it was old ACT questions scored the same way, all of that.
Interesting. That's an interesting cohort to start with, because that was a cohort significantly impacted by the pandemic as freshmen off campus for almost all 2021. So just to be interesting to see if that makes a difference in terms of that test going forward. And you're right. I mean, we meet with admissions counselors all the time. The weight of the ACT is dropping in the college admission process, even at highly selective schools. But they still, kids can still submit it if they did well as part of their portfolio, but our schools that are opting out of providing for it. So I do, Roxanne, we wanted to increase access to the ACT, which is why we chose to administer, but there was also a requirement to administer a college career readiness test for all our students, correct?
Absolutely. There are, and MSIP 6 is changing, but to Rachel's point, in part of our college and career readiness, there is there are more than one test that a student could take to qualify. So if a student is going to vocational school, for example, we've got some CTSO options for students that are in career track, ASVAB. So it's the ACT is not a one and done. We do have other testing options for students that might make other post-secondary career choices.
And some of the work that I know they did with the department teams was also looking at the college and career readiness standards, not just the scores necessarily, but looking at where those standards fit into our curriculum. And they compared them next to the Missouri Learning Standards as well, just to kind of see what changes and patterns and whatnot they were noticing there with those as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions before we move to the next item? Okay. Food service update, Chris?
Sure, this will just take a moment. We've been discussing the move the district is making to a food service management company. Just wanted to give you a quick update on that. First, I think I'll give you just a little bit of context, especially for our newer board members. Let me get my notes up here. So I believe this is my 6th year in working with the food service department, directly supervising that department and working with Irene Wan, our former food service manager. And since that time, staffing has always been a struggle. We don't necessarily understand why, but we do know that along with us having a problem keeping our positions filled, our temp agencies were also having a hard time filling our vacant positions with their temporary workers. So this has been a trend that has been long, and COVID just made it exponentially worse. So without getting into all the various details of how all that works, our food service manager did resign. Prior to that, we had been discussing the possibility of moving to a food service management company. And our hesitance in doing that even in a prior year, or suggesting us doing that in prior years, is because of how valued the nutrition program, along with our seed to table program, the strong curricular connections that we have between our cafeterias and our classrooms, were vitally important to the district and me. And I was confident that we would be able to continue to be self-operated. We would be able to maintain those connections because we had direct control over them. The staffing problems, along with supply chain issues, along with, I could say, and just make it unreasonable for the district to continue to be self-operated and still offer our students the quality food that we expect, they expect, and our community expects, and also the fidelity of the programming connections between the cafeterias and the classrooms. That can only be done with the staffing. And since we don't have that, we have decided to move forward with the food service management company. So a long explanation as to how we got here, but I've had conversations with a number of them individually, and I had a meeting with them all at the mandatory walkthrough this past Monday, where I told them that I could not overstate the importance of maintaining the strong curricular connections between our cafeterias and our spaces. And when I took them on the walkthroughs, I took them to the bee garden. I took them to every single garden that we have. They spoke with 2 of our 3 seed to table and sustainability instructors, where we just continue to hammer home how important it is that we maintain the fidelity of our seed to table program and the connections to our cafeterias. So I've seen those connections that these companies have made with other districts, and I can tell you that the one that we choose will be the one that does the best at that. So having said that, we did have the mandatory walkthrough on Monday. I was encouraged. I was expecting 3 companies, and I believe 4 or 5 came, and they didn't just come like with one rep, they came with like a whole entourage. We had 5 cars that were following me around the district. So I was very encouraged by that. And we viewed all of our kitchens. I had them talk with the head cooks in each of our buildings. They looked at all of our equipment. They asked us about operations. I was very pleased with the level of questions that they asked and the detail that they were looking for as they were on that walkthrough. So the bids are due on June 16th, where we will open those bids and begin our evaluation process. The central office administrative team will evaluate those, and we'll make sure that the board has access to those as well. And we will make a decision and a recommendation and bring that to you for a decision at our work session on the 28th. So we are moving forward with this timeline aggressively, but that will not impact the decision that we make. The decision that we make will be done in the best interest of our students in our district. So do you have any questions? Fantastic.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for all that hard work.
You're quite welcome.
Okay, it's still the Chris show. I think we've got finance now.
Yes, and I will move this quickly, but give it its due diligence as well. So as I share the financial statements here. Okay, so we're just about done with the fiscal year here, and it's been a bit of a stressful week on the revenue side of the house. You know, we had certain expectations. I like to hit our budgetary targets. It's a very important thing for me, especially for my career trajectory. I am looking at current taxes right now about just under 90%, which is slightly over collected, higher than collected last year. I pause here on this very first line because on Sunday we saw appear in our bank $2.5 million in local tax receipts. That is the impounded protested taxes that have been released. So, you know, they've been sort of inconsistent with the release of those funds in prior years. We have those funds. So once the next set of financial statements, you see that we will have crushed this current taxes revenue budget. So that's very exciting to me. This is one of the more difficult ones to get a handle on, just because it's so directly tied to tax rates and collection rates and all of those other things. So I'm very pleased by that. So I expect a very positive presentation next month. As we move through, all of our other revenues are tracking mostly as we would expect. When you see large changes, that's usually due to timing, like we received prior year funds in the current year, and it throws off our budgetary numbers from time to time. All said and done, our revenues are tracking as we would expect, right within a percent-ish of where we were last year. And that's a fantastic place to be this time of the year. Debt service does track along right with the local taxes. Another thing that is interesting that I'll talk about in just a minute is interest. We're starting to earn just a bit more interest as interest rates are moving at the Fed. And I'll have some more communications that'll come out to the board regarding our bond issue funds and the interest that we could potentially and returns we could earn on those in future months. More on that later. I will skip through to the object level of our expenses. You can see here from the percentages just at a glance, some are slightly over, some are slightly under as compared to the prior year. But we are at that time of the year when we are continuing to process all of the invoices outstanding and other purchases that have been lagging, or other expenses that have been lagging are now catching up. All purchasing it for the most part has stopped, except for those that are critical to the operation. So as the weeks go by, we'll get a clearer picture as to where we're going to end the year. I will say that I am confident that we will end the year strong. I feel that we will outperform this budget. And this evening I'll present to you a budget amendment recommendation that will be part one of part two. Part two will come in June. So right now, this budget as of April, 46.3% budgeted fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. I will present to you in a moment a budget amendment that will alter that slightly, and I'll have a bit of an explanation as to why that happens and what that will look like moving forward. Any questions?
I don't have a question, but I do want the board to know, Chris, your team and Margaret Scordius, who works with federal programs, all of this extra money has been a blessing, but these people have spent countless extra hours beyond what they normally do, trying to understand the multifaceted rules by which we account for the money, how we, the plans that have had to be made, how we're drawing down and spending, and each one has special nuances. So when he says it's been a challenging week, we've had people working literally round the clock to make sure that this money comes in and the budget is set. So I do want to publicly express my appreciation to them because I know it's been difficult.
Absolutely. They've been working very hard. And I should have said this earlier. Today, between last night, well, it was really probably today, and right just before this meeting, the district applied for about $1.1 million worth of federal funding that we hope to take receipt of in this fiscal year. And we were up against a hard deadline, which was end of business today, and we nailed it. So, but it did take the work of the entire team. So including Roxanne. Okay, may I move on?
Yes, please.
Okay, so here's the budget amendment that I spoke of. I need to stop share. Okay, here it is. Okay, so a whole lot of numbers. I don't expect, I will draw your attention to the ones that are important. So I'll present to you the result of the amendment. If you draw your attention here to the fourth column where it says proposed adjustments, amendment 3, anything in parentheses here is a reduction in revenue. Anything that is not in parentheses is an increase in revenue. And this is just the general fund, which is, I have the funds listed here. If you have questions about that, just shoot me an email. I'm happy to explain it to you. As we move through here, we are reducing revenue overall about $135,500. We are increasing expenditures about $450,000, sort of. So I'll pause here and explain what I mean by that. Is in order to get those deadlines, we had to get a budget amendment on the table that was an accurate reflection of both our expenses and our revenues, and they have to match. So we flat ran out of time to get all of the expenses that we moved, because it's an offset. So if we spend $500 on a supply that's paid for with federal funds, we move that expense from the district funds to the federal funds. So right now we have a pretty significant double budgeting in those funds that we're using federal dollars to pay for. So we will get those on the final budget amendment, and it'll be a much truer look. But we had to get those expenses on the books in the budget so that we could make sure that all of our documentation was correct. So moving on to the go ahead. Sorry.
I'll
Lisa.
just add, really the issue is we've spent according to plan. We are finding we're having to do several budget amendments that have to roll through the department, and there has been some delay. And so we sometimes are at the mercy of waiting for things to come back for us to file. So it's all in process. The money will come. It's just a matter of whether it will be booked now or next month or the month after. So
yes. And this is the budget, which is the best numbers that we can present to you based on the information that we currently have. Special revenue is the teachers fund. So this is a fund that is obligated to pay just for salaries and benefits for our certificated staff. Just making some slight adjustments here. Debt service, this is used to pay our bonded indebtedness. There's really no changes here other than we did a budget transfer, which was a dollar for dollar transfer between principal and interest to correct a prior adjustment. Capital projects fund, this does not include our bond construction projects. That's why the numbers are so low. But you can see here, we're increasing revenue on this side. And this is actually a transfer. So we are increasing the expenditures on capital projects, but we transferred the same amount from our general fund. So this is a dollar for dollar switch. So there's actually not an increase here. Okay, this is our bond issue fund. So the way we budgeted this year is we budgeted the entire balance for this project. We will not expend $25.8 million. So the next time you see this, it'll be a more accurate look of what we expended and a more accurate look at what the fund balance remaining will be as we come into the next fiscal year, which will complete the final phase of the project. This is all funds. So you can see the numbers are big, slight. The bond funds inside of this look of the budget makes things look very askew. So that's why you see $54 million here instead of something more on the lines of 29. Operations. I believe I duplicated this slide. So, oh no, this is the last one. So this is the part why I spent so much time explaining the offsets in revenues versus expenditures for the federal dollars, because you do see a decrease represented here on the fund balance to 41.2. This will increase as we write off all of those expenses to the federal funds budgets. So this will change, and I'll make sure to draw attention to that when we review it in June. And I will not go through this because it's long and small, but this is the account level detail that backs up all of the schedules that I just took you through. Are there any questions?
Thank you for that. Thorough as always, thorough and detailed.
Yeah, I mean, Chris, I think there are many questions in my mind based on just some of the, acknowledgements you've made that there's some strangeness about this. So perhaps we should revisit this in more depth next month when that.
Absolutely. And essentially, Katie, I can sum it up for you. Maybe let me say it in a way that is, let me just say it more directly. We drew down about $883,000 in federal funds. We had about a little over, just around $300,000 of those budgeted as expenses. The rest of that was already existed as expenses in our budget, but not our federal programs budget. So we spent the money out of our regular budget, and we have to move those expenses over into our federal programs budgets. So right now, we nearly have a dollar for dollar match and a double budget on our expenditures represented in this particular budget amendment. So when we make our end of the year adjustments and bring to you our final budget amendment, we will have corrected that, which will lower our expenses budget by the same amount that we drew down, less what we had already budgeted.
Thank you for that.
I'm not sure that helps.
Maybe I can say it this way. We had to spend things that we can charge to federal dollars out of operating funds because the ESSER funds were not released. And now that the ESSER funds are released, we know what we bought. We bought according to plan. We have to collect the receipts. We have to run the calculations to make sure that we're transferring it into the correct ESSER funds that have now been created accounts. We have to set a DESI budget to make sure that it all matches, and sometimes do budget amendments to get it according to their accounting codes. And then once we've moved everything into codes they will accept, we can draw down the money. So we have done that for, what did you say, about a little, right around $1 million, Chris? And we have some more to go before all of that will be complete. So it's all been spent once. It's all been spent correctly out of the right budgets. We are trying to match DESI accounting codes currently, Katie, if that helps you understand it as simply as I know how to say it.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. I wish it wasn't so complicated.
Yeah, and I recognize that school district budgeting is like intentionally complicated for no particular reason, but yes, great, thank you.
You're very welcome. All right, so with your permission, I'll continue here with the budget presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay, so to our new board members, in the next budget, or excuse me, in the next board communication update, I will link for you the previous budget presentations that I've given so that at your leisure, you can go back and review sort of the progression that began in this past February, so that you're sort of getting dropped in at the end of the process, and I'll give you access to the beginning of the process. And you can always contact me with questions. So last month I presented, well, 2 months ago actually, and last month I presented to you the TIFs in the area. Here those are. I've left those in. I have not yet adjusted revenues. We do have let me get to, yes, this slide here.
Chris, can you share your screen with us?
Oh gosh,
Sorry,
I'm
it's
sorry.
not being shared.
I forgot to do that. There you go. So here are our TIFs as reported in prior months. And the revenue here has not changed. I will be adjusting this for the final budget presentation as we recalculate tax rates and put any recoupments that we've discovered into those tax rates. So those will be adjusted slightly. Prop C, basic formula, federal funding. Federal funding will decrease because at this time, we don't believe there will be any additional funding beyond the ESSER 3 funds, or the ones that we've already been given access to, so the federal dollars will decrease there back to what we consider a normal rate. This is a schedule that represents the revenue as we expect it to be. So you'll notice that 22, there's this significant bump that's related to the federal funding that will fall away after this fiscal year. But you'll see in comparison to the prior fiscal year, it is more in line. It's just a graphical representation of the revenues by source. And you can see that as a state revenue, while it is a significant portion of our budget, it is not the most significant portion of our budget. So when the state makes those changes, we are somewhat insulated from the impact of those changes, both on the good side and the bad, the hot and the cold side of that. But I do hear that the state is fully funding the formula this year. So and also fully funding the transportation side of that too, for the first time in a long time. So I'm very encouraged by that. These are the positions. You've seen these previously. We are continuing to move forward with hiring on a couple of these, but for the most part, a number of at least the org chart changes have been hired, and you have seen or will be seeing soon. Salaries. This has not changed since the last time we talked, other than adding staffing, the actual numbers as we've reached agreements with our new hires. Benefits, I was also encouraged, which I'm usually not when I look at benefits numbers, but I was expecting about a 7.5% increase overall in our medical premiums. While we still are in the top tier with the trust, our claims experience was only 101% this past year, which is good because we've had years that are much higher than that, but it is a 3-year rolling average. Happy to report that we will experience only a 5.3 increase in our medical premiums, which is a lot better than I was anticipating. Overall benefits increase 8%. If you're wondering why those numbers don't directly correlate, it's because the retirement salary is based on the salary plus the medical benefits. So the increase of those two things combined to create a higher overall benefits increase to the budget. Purchase services and supplies are still moving around slightly as we make adjustments and prioritize expenses. Capital outlay and projects are by building, and they're in no specific order, but we are still prioritizing these things. As we get closer to the finish line here, we will be making some decisions about things that can move into the next year or phased into another project. But we do have to be cautious because we have been engaging in deferred maintenance of a number of items around our district. And we need to make sure that our safe and inspirational spaces are actually safe and inspirational. So we will be prioritizing those, and we'll present that final list to you at the budget workshop. Debt, I have no control over that. That is principal and interest as scheduled for the coming year. It's one of the few things in the budget that I can actually put a concrete target on, is the expenses on our capital debt. Here's a schedule that shows overall. Okay, so at this point, this is the operations side of the budget, which excludes debt and also the bond issue funds that we're using to do this Prop E projects, these Prop E projects. We are looking at about a 9-ish% decrease in the fund balance from what is in April as of this presentation, 46.3 to a 36.7% fund balance. So as we move on to next steps, we will finalize all of the various building and departmental budgets, and we will finalize the work on the budget document, which will take you through and give you access to as soon as it's complete. And then I'll give you the final revenue and expense projections at our budget workshop this coming June. And then you'll be presented with the budget to approve at the June 28th work session. I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Is anybody else hearing an echo? Okay, I think it's over. Okay. Okay, on to board communications, calendar of events. So we're almost at the end, which is a good thing. I'm sure everybody's tired. We've got graduations coming up. 8th grade promotion is going to be June 1st at 6 p.m. Please make sure it's on everyone's calendar. We've canceled the June 2nd board work session, so make sure you mark that. And graduation for high school is on June 3rd at 7. The 6th grade promotions at 8:30 and 10:30 that day. Does anybody know, is that, it looks like they're doing it in separate groups because of the capacity and the amount of people that are attending. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm assuming we're leaving that to just those that have been invited, the 6th grade and their families. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Good to know. So that's really most of June. We've got another Board of Education meeting on the 16th. Is there anything else that, oh, and Taste of Maplewood is this weekend. Is there anything else that anyone wanted to add?
Yeah, the stage band plays at 6 o'clock tomorrow on the main stage on Sutton Boulevard. So don't be late. They play for about 45 minutes.
Awesome. It's guaranteed to be a good time. Anything else? Okay, CBTF.
We did not have a CBTF meeting.
Well, and did we skipped board committees, Madam President?
That is because I am still working some stuff out to send out to our newest members so we can rearrange some of our committees. So that will be going out soon. Okay, Wellness Committee.
The Wellness Committee met this past Monday. I think it was a shorter meeting as a result of the end of the year and not as many staff being available to participate. But one highlight was some preliminary discussion of the partnership that the district is exploring with the Little Bit Foundation to service our WOW families, which could have a sustained year-round impact. So looking
awesome.
forward to seeing that come to life.
That's awesome. Fundraising Committee.
Those of you who were at Scholarship Night saw that we awarded 6 Nelson Mitten scholarships. Nelson himself awarded 6 Nelson Mitten scholarships. I think our unofficial total, the numbers that Ed shared with me is 7,200. I think that there may have been a couple of square gifts that might have come in from some other folks, but we'll get a final for that. In our discussions about awarding those funds, we weren't sure, Chris, if funds had been reserved from last year to support the awardees from last year, this year. Do we need to spend that money out of this year's funds? Or
No,
did we hold it aside?
We can hold it aside.
But did we last year hold it aside for this year's distribution to the students who are already enrolled in college?
I will need to check, but I believe that we expended all that we had this past year.
Okay, so we held enough aside and didn't award it this year to cover last year's awardees. So
That is my understanding.
okay, so we'll have a couple of $100s for next year's fundraising campaign.
And Amber, really quick question too. How many did we award last year?
2.
And we awarded how many this year?
6.
That's a pretty significant growth over a year. Thank you for all of your hard work and making that happen.
It's definitely a team effort in every sense of that description. Thank you all for donating.
Okay, next on board communications, I don't have a report for Joe's Place. What about SSD Governing Council?
No report. Next meeting's in June.
Okay. Okay, on to action items. We have construction change orders.
I move to approve the construction change orders as presented.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. On to Apple Computers.
I move to approve the 2022 to 23 Apple order as presented.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries. Budget Amendment 3.
I move to approve Budget Amendment 3 as presented.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries. COVID-19 mitigation measures.
I move we approve the suspended MRH universal mitigation measures. Sorry.
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Academic calendar.
I move to approve the 2023 to 24 academic calendar as presented.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Strategic Planning Services selection.
I move to select Inside Education as the organizational partner to lead MRH through the strategic planning process.
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Oh, sorry.
Kat, I
Katie?
just note that the budget impact listed here is different than what was listed above. So I think this would just need to get edited in the, it wasn't part of the motion, but it's just the content listed.
Thank you. We'll update it.
Thank you. I believe we voted. Is that right? Okay. Motion carried. Okay. Can I get Linda to take us into executive session, please?
You're muted, Linda.
I can't hear you.
Oh, no. Okay.
She's unmuted, so I'm not sure. Maybe it's her mic.
Okay, we can figure it out. If we can get Ms. Tasman Ewing to take us into executive session, please.
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsections 3, 9, and 13, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on May 19th, 2022 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters.
Can I get a roll call? Oh, sorry. Thank you. Can I get a roll call?
Ms. Tasman Ewing,
Yes.
Ms. Herndon Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Goldsman,
Yes.
Ms. Kaufman,
Yes.
Ms. Withicom,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson. Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now enter executive session.
Board members, do not log off. I will let you know shortly in no uncertain terms when the live stream has ended.